Welcome. You're listening to the Kourting Happiness Podcast, episode 1, and we're here to help you commit to happiness one episode at a time with positive psychology and much more. I'm Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a happiness scholar and your host of this podcast. Welcome to our first episode. I feel like I should cue the confetti or something. As you can tell, I am so excited. You could probably hear by the sound of my voice. I'm so happy to be here and happier that you're listening. Today, we're going to focus really on really who we are. And really also as relates to the why of this show. I want to get to know you, and I'm going to spend this time giving you an opportunity to get to know me. You will learn how to have a happier, positive life, as well as simple strategies that will help you concerning your well-being and your self-care. That's the mission of this show. That's what the show is really all about. And it's also about creating a ripple effect concerning happiness. I like to call it creating a positive continuum, right? That ripple effect is like a real positive continuum that continues in terms, it starts with you and it starts to really kind of permeate as it relates throughout. Before I get started talking about the show and what you will expect, I really want to give a big thank you to everyone, really for everyone that has been encouraging me to make this podcast a reality. We've been working on so many exciting projects to bring science to life for you and really inspire and empower you. Also, a big, huge thank you to all the other podcasters out there who have been cheering me on and encouraging me as it relates to starting this podcast. This will be my second podcast, but this one is a solo podcast with just me. I've been so fortunate to host a second podcast with Dr. Stephanie Dean called Thriving in Toxicity. And I'm so grateful for her and so many other podcasters who have been cheering me on as it relates to making this show a reality. Also, I want to thank so many of the reporters and journalists, and also my favorite award-winning journalist, my fiance, Ken Lemon, who has been right by my side saying, "Are you going to record the podcast today?" Guys, he asks me that every day. Every day. "Hey, are you recording the podcast today? Is this happening? When is it happening? It's happening today." He's been my greatest cheerleader. And he's one of the many reasons why this show is a reality in terms of his level of support. Well, to answer my fiance's question, are you going to record today? Well, today is the day. Today is the day as it relates to the official launch of the Kourting Happiness Podcast. Thank you so much for this time, and really this time that you're spending listening. Now, let's talk. As you can tell, I enjoy talking, right? But let's talk. I want you to know me, and I'm looking forward, as I mentioned, to getting to know you, each of you that are listening. This show is all about community. Yes, community. I want you to join the conversation in the Kourting Happiness Podcast Facebook group. So the Kourting Happiness Podcast Community Facebook group, I want you to join us, be able to share your stories, share about how the episode made you feel, or how it's helped you, or how it's helped other people in your life. Remember, this is all about learning how to enhance your well-being and then also being able to help others. Remember, it's that positive continuum, right? That ripple effect of finding out how we can go and start creating more talk and more intention as it relates to the importance of our well-being. So let me share a little bit more about my background. I am a former news director, television reporter, and radio personality turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I speak and train countless audiences, from journalists to news directors and executives, as it relates to understanding well-being at work, understanding the value of creating a happier life, and understanding the importance of creating it in terms of the workplace, right? I am also an assistant professor who works with the next generation of journalists, public relations executives, media professionals, and entrepreneurs. And also, I will tell you this, that I also really value being able to help transform lives. And you're going to find out a little bit more why it's so meaningful to me. So this episode is all about me sharing the why of this show, right? Again, this show is about committing to happiness, your well-being, one episode at a time. Remember, every episode is about sharing some best practices with you that will empower you, that will inspire you, and that will help you transform your life and creating that positive continuum in terms of the lives of other people around you. Also, you will learn about positive psychology because that's my area. My area is interdisciplinary. So I incorporate positive psychology. I have an MBA, so I also incorporate business and also my background as it relates to media. So I have so many different interdisciplinary approaches, but my area of research really focuses on how to leverage positive psychology, how positive psychology can help serve you. And positive psychology is all about really sharing how individuals and communities flourish, what we do well, our strengths, and also how we can have a more meaningful life and a fulfilling life and what that looks like. And sharing science that's really going to serve you. And I like to say this, it serves others too, because then again, that's all about being able to understand levels of self. It's like being able to really share this wonderful gift of empowering other people with this information as it relates to how it can serve them too. Right. So again, you'll learn about positive psychology. You'll learn, other forms and approaches as it relates to well-being. I'll start incorporating other individuals that are in and out of positive psychology, as well as people in business, as well as other psychologists and so forth, in regards to this conversation. And you will meet so many people who will inspire you and as well as inform you. All right. And so again, I am a happiness scholar. So I'm a researcher. So I love sharing that information in regards to really be able to provide it for the public. And another thing is that positive psychology is really a movement. It's a movement of sharing more science with the public that will really serve them in terms of flourishing in this world. And so one of the things that I do love about this movement so much, it kind of combines a lot of my competencies and skills. Because of being a journalist, I value sharing information, and being a scholar allows me to be a researcher and be able to share my research and the wonderful research of so many other amazing scholars from all over the world. So I want you to think of this as it relates to this podcast. I want you to see it as your permission slip. Remember when we were kids and we would have to go to our parents and ask for permission to go on a field trip, right? And then our parents would take a look at the information, find out a little bit more about the field trip, and then they would sign it, and then we would go and we would give it back to our teacher, right? In terms of saying, okay, we are allowed, or I'm allowed to be here. Well, I want you to see this podcast as your permission slip to be human, to be able to really value this journey, trust the journey of understanding and really learning, right? More information that's going to serve you. That's really going to help in terms of empower you as it relates to evidence-based strategies. So talking about science, we'll talk about science a lot, and then we'll also talk about other elements and other different strategies, other things that have been serving other individuals and their communities. Right? So this is great. And one of the things I can honestly tell you as it relates to a social experiment, it gives you the greatest permission of being able to really value self-discovery. So when you're on this, quote, social experiment for yourself, right, it's about then picking and choosing, looking and learning and beginning to really see what's going to help you, right? So all the evidence-based strategies that you will actually learn while you are listening to this podcast, you say, wow, I'm going to try to incorporate, oh, wow, that fits in perfectly with my life. Or you may say, I'm going to try that to see if that's going to increase my levels of happiness. Is that going to actually bring about some positive emotion? Like, wow. And you're going to learn about all of these skills, all of these, really these important aspects as it relates to the value of positive psychology, and also much more. Much more. So remember, this podcast is your permission slip to be human and to really cultivate your own social experiment. I want you to take a break. I want you to learn. And I want you to value the process. Value process over perfection, right? I will tell you this. I am a constant work in progress as it relates to this area. Like, oh no, it has to be just right. It has to be exactly the way I envisioned it. And then I have learned the most valuable lesson along the way, which is just value the process. Value how you are going to learn different elements within the journey. Value the fact that it may not happen exactly the way you envisioned, but wow, it's still a positive outcome here. Or even if it's not a positive outcome, wow, something I learned from that. I learned something else about myself, or I learned something else about this scenario, right? It's valuing the process. It's valuing the process. And having that mindset is so important because it gives us permission as it relates to, okay, I'm on this journey now. I'm taking steps, right? And I'm learning so much along the way. Well, I would tell you, I've learned a lot of lessons. And I'm going to just share a little bit about my lessons. And also, I would tell you how hard it can be when you're going through the process, right? But again, is valuing process over perfection. So when I was 25 years old, I was working my dream job as a television reporter. Matter of fact, I had gone from a small market to a top 10 market. So market number 4, which at the time was Philadelphia, right? So here I am, a television reporter for a new 24-hour news station in Philadelphia. So here I am coming from a small market station in Midland, Texas, making this incredible jump to Philadelphia. I was so excited about working my way up in the industry because that's what we do in terms of journalism. Many of us will look for, to go from market to market, and we all have different goals, right, in the industry. So my goal was always to go from market to market and try to work my way up in terms of market size. And I did, went from a small market to a very large market. But it really also was a quality of life standpoint for me. And I will tell you, because I was so happy that I would be with my fiance at the time. We had a long distance relationship. He moved me 1,800 miles away to that small market station in Midland, Texas. And that was an opportunity for me to cultivate my skills as a journalist. So for me, it was, to land a job just 20 to 30 minutes away from where he was priceless, priceless. So 3 weeks before our wedding, my mother was diagnosed with sarcoma cancer. So she had to have emergency surgery. And I will tell you that I couldn't imagine getting married without her. But we did, literally at her bedside when she was released from the hospital at my parents' home. My mother wore a robe, literally got her out of bed just for the moment of seeing us legally get married. It wasn't the event that was planned. My parents had planned this beautiful wedding. in the mountains of New Jersey. This beautiful outdoor wedding in the mountains of New Jersey, in this beautiful mansion in the mountains. But again, it didn't happen the way we envisioned, but it happened because my fiance at the time told me he waited his whole life to marry me, and he didn't want this day to go by, even if we had to get married in my mother's hospital room. And I thought that would nearly happen, but we got married at my parents' home. So literally at her bedside, remember, we got her up and she wore a robe. You know, my mother was like a fashionista. She loved dressing and just loved fashion, you know, as I sit here talking to you wearing her pearls. And I will tell you that I was so grateful for that moment, because 86 days after that day, my husband died. We were together for 8 years, college sweethearts, but married just barely 3 months. He was accidentally shot and killed, and I will share more about that as the podcast goes on. But I was still so grateful for that time with him, and so grateful that my mother could be there to see it. 20 years later, after being a widow, and also later becoming a divorcee, I'll talk about that during our podcast as well. After being a widow and divorcee, again, 20 years later, I lost my mother after her 17-year battle with cancer. So much has helped me get through this. Actually, I have a TED Talk that focuses on how positive psychology has served me throughout the years. And so even before I started learning about the elements of positive psychology, there were certain practices. And when I started to dive into the area, I go, wow, I was doing that. Wow. Oh gosh, this is great. So, so many of the practices that I had leveraged, but then when I began to study, I really started to understand certain levels. And that's one of the reasons why I really cherish and are so passionate about my area of research, about learning so much about positive psychology and the research in the area, the research I've done in the area, and then the research of countless scholars from all over the world. And it's interesting, Dr. Lucy Hone, which I also will talk about her during elements of you're going to hear in future podcasts. She has a great book called Resilient Grieving. And I really felt like I was really a great example of resilient grieving, of going through that loss of my mother later in life, going through that loss early on in my life at 25 years old, and really seeing the difference and the value of time and treasuring time. So this podcast is where I will share lots of information in terms of science with you, right? You will learn so much about positive psychology, other elements of psychology, also other areas from other experts. But you will also hear a level of vulnerability from me. I will also share with you my life, my lessons, and the importance of positive psychology, and so much more. So on this journey, I want you to consider this podcast as a companion, and I want you to create a well-being journal. So I want you to go find your favorite notebook. Like, this is what I usually do when I'm trying to find a great notebook. I go to Target. I spend so much time there. The pandemic has allowed me to look at that a little differently, so I'll spend a lot more time online. I found a great notebook on Amazon the other day. But I want you to find a notebook that you feel drawn to. That is this beautiful place where you can share information. And I want you to always pull it out when you're listening to this podcast. All the lessons you learned from me and countless other experts, and those who have this incredible transformational story, these amazing narratives that will empower you, I want you to add to your journal. I also want you to add some of the things that you're going to learn along the way. This will help you develop your well-being strategy. I'm going to teach you all of these different skills as it relates to what your well-being strategy looks like, right? All of these different strategies, evidence-based strategies, by the way, that will serve you. Or better yet, those that you can experiment with to see which one serves you more than maybe it might serve someone else, right? Remember, it's a social experiment. And I want you to give yourself permission in terms of really valuing all that you're learning and really valuing how it will serve you. And then feel free to share it with others, because it's all about that positive continuum. I really believe, in terms of the well-being strategy, the importance of having a plan. This will allow you to be intentional. You know, I will tell you that goals, or writing down goals, has served me well. Writing down goals has helped me in my career when I made a transition from after almost nearly 2 decades in broadcasting. And I decided, you know what, in my mid to late 30s, I decided I was going to start working on my PhD. Entered into the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communication, and spent nearly 4 years on my PhD. Literally paused my life to work on my PhD full time, and it was one of the best decisions in my life. When I train individuals, I often share that creating your plan is like going to the gym, right? So when you go to the gym, you are thinking about what you're going to accomplish when you go to the gym, right? So you go to the gym, you pretty much know that you're going to work on cardio or weights, or maybe you might decide you're going to work on a combination of both. I want you to think intentionally as it relates to your well-being. This podcast will provide evidence-based strategies to help you flourish. Every week, I will launch a new episode. Every Thursday, you'll find that new episode. And I will tell you that I like calling Thursdays Transformational Thursday. It's a day dedicated, right? I like to say, into really me focusing in on levels of transformation that day. Not saying I don't do it throughout the week, but that day I am real specific and intentional. Matter of fact, my students chime in on and call it Transformational Thursday. I have other people that I coach and talk about the value of Transformational Thursday. All right, so every week I will launch a new episode. But I want to hear from you. I want you to join the community on Facebook. All right, the Kourting Happiness Podcast community. Go to Facebook and search for Kourting, which is spelled Kourting. I'll say it one more time. It's Kourting. So Kourting Happiness Podcast community. All right, this is a space for you to learn and leverage. Is a space for you to share and to celebrate individuals and for us to celebrate you. I'm looking forward to seeing you there, and I am so happy that you're here. I'm so happy that you're listening right now. And I'm so happy that we're going to be a part of this journey together. Okay, I'm going to end our first episode. You now know the why. I'm looking forward to hearing more as it relates to your commitment to happiness and well-being. Don't forget to join the Kourting Happiness Podcast community on Facebook. And also we have a Kourting Happiness movement page too. Get ready to learn how to commit to well-being one episode at a time. I'm Dr. Alston. Be well, be happy, and be kind to yourselves. Can't wait to see you next week.